Okay, the biggest mind-blowing movie slash show, song, game, anything you want to talk about. So I'll go first on this one because I have two. I'll talk about them briefly. The one that comes to mind immediately for me is from 1997. It's a neo-noir film directed by David Lynch called Lost Highway.
Oh, wow.
And it stars Bill Pullman, Patricia Arquette, Robert Blake, and it's got some Gary Busey in there for good measure. uh, when it came out, so it came out in '97. I was working at a movie theater, and one of the things that had to be done usually on Wednesday nights, the projectionist would put the print together because it wasn't like it is now where it's all digital. I mean, they were working with film, so they would bring in canisters of film during the day. The projectionist would spend all day splicing reels together, and then that night after the theater closed, he had to run the print to make sure that he didn't put one in upside down or backwards or something like that, because the show was going to be opening the next day. So usually we would stay after work and we would watch it. He had to run it anyway, so we would just watch the film. So, you guys want to watch this movie? It's called Lost Highway. I was like, I guess. I don't have anything else to do. I went there and watched it, and we were just like, what in the crap is this movie? Because have you guys ever seen it?
No.
I've seen bits and pieces on it on cable, like late night, and I remember Robert Blake most of all.
If you watch it late at night is probably the worst time to watch it, because if you're the least bit sleepy, you're not going to understand anything. But
I find that with most David Lynch films, I'm sort of so intrigued visually and aesthetically that I don't care about the plot, because they're usually very obtuse, and maybe I'm not smart enough to get them. But the only one that I've really been able to follow was Blue Velvet. And I mean, Lost Highway was just more surreal, and it's sort of like surreal. And I mean, I think he's just doing it for the effect rather than the linear narrative. But I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's fine. I can't really tell you the plot. It's been so many years since I've seen it, but essentially, Bill Pullman plays a guy that he starts getting these VHS tapes delivered to his house, and when he plays them, it's video of him and his wife sleeping, so he's like, well, who's taking these videos, and then he gets one day and he plays it, and it is a video of him sitting beside his wife's body that he's just murdered. And then all of a sudden he's in jail, and then he quantum leaps into another person. And it's a young guy, and the young guy is dating an older woman who is played by Patricia Arquette, who also played Bill Pullman's wife. And it's strange. There's one scene where he's talking to Robert Blake's character at a party, and Robert Blake hands him a phone. He puts the phone up to his ear, and it's Robert Blake on the phone. And he tells him something, and then he says, now give me back my phone. He just hands him back the phone. I'm like, what is this? But it was, if you watch the entire movie, by the end of it, it kind of makes a little bit of sense, but not really. But it is interesting. There is a lot of visual stuff going on that I liked, and but it's not a movie that I go back and watch on a regular basis. I've seen it maybe twice in my life. I know he did Twin Peaks, and I never saw Twin Peaks, but I've heard that it's strange.
It's strange. It's strange. And I watched it because the Twin Peaks revival came on Showtime, like the third season. So I started watching Twin Peaks, and the Who Killed Laura Palmer stuff was really good and weird and David Lynch. And then it turned into some kind of weird comic farce. And it was just, I couldn't get through it. And then I was reading some sites, and they said you can basically skip from when you realize that this Bob character is spoilers 30 years ago, but you can skip to the last episode of the series after the whole Laura Palmer stuff and not miss anything. And that's kind of where Lynch picked it up from, where I forget, Cooper is taken over by this entity, this evil entity, and he's stuck in the Black Lodge, and they sort of take him out from there. It goes from there. And again, watched a lot of that third season on Showtime, it lost me because he will deliberately not come to a resolution, even though it's right there and everybody wants it. He's just basically like, well, F you. And it got frustrating after a while, despite the fact that it was just trippy and some really amazing visuals and such interesting stuff and disturbing stuff. But it you got to give something to keep you going. And he just never did. And it just like after a while, the shtick got old.
Didn't one of the characters turn into a teapot or something like that?
I don't even remember.
I,
Or I
it's-
didn't get that far. I didn't get that far. You
yeah, I
know?
heard there was a character that yeah, for some reason I don't know if the actor quit or whatever, but all of a sudden the character is a talking teapot or something like that. But the other one I want to throw out just real quick is Memento. Came out in 2000. It's a Christopher Nolan film that had Guy Pearce in it, and it's about a guy that's trying to solve his wife's murder, but he's dealing with short-term memory loss. So the entire movie is told in reverse because he can only remember like the last few minutes. So they're only showing you what he can remember, and so every scene in the film takes place after, or every scene in the film actually takes place before the scene that it came after. So they actually did another release of it where they show the film in reverse, which is actually linear, and it makes the story make a lot more sense, but it also makes the story look kind of simple. The fact that it's in reverse and everything is the crux of the twist. So I enjoyed that, but it is mind blowing. Virginia, what about you?
Well, we recently watched this past weekend A Clockwork Orange, which I had
Oh
never
yeah.
seen
Wow.
before. And that movie was so bizarre, so trippy, so like they go into a milk bar and all the furniture is like women mannequins who are naked and the milk comes out of their nipples.
hmm
And then like there are fights in the milk bar, like
The
all
milk is
our
laced with LSD.
right.
Yeah.
They have like their own language that I couldn't understand,
Yeah.
like all of these bold colors, bold shapes, architecture. I was just like, was Stanley Kubrick on acid? I don't know.
I read the book and Kubrick. It's the language and stuff
Mhm.
is a fairly faithful adaptation of what Burgess wrote in the book, with the ultraviolence and the lovely, lovely Ludwig van and
Mhm.
the droogs and all that stuff is right from the book. I think he added, the singing in the rain obviously is the most iconic, and then the
Yeah.
thing with the when he's forced to watch all the violence and his eyes are peeled open.
Mhm.
That's all Kubrick, his aesthetic coming through, but it really is a fairly good adaptation of the Burgess book.
And what I
And the
read
book is
is that
probably just as trippy.
it
Yeah.
was. I read it too, and what I read is that Burgess wrote that book in like 3 days. He just locked himself in a room and wrote that book and put it out. And the language kind of makes sense because I mean, if someone from the 50s were to listen to teenagers today talk, they would have no idea what they're saying. So if we're watching a story of young people in the future, they would have slang that we wouldn't understand. So I kind of like that aspect of it. But yeah, that is a weird movie. Rick, I'm sure you've seen it before,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. It's been a long time, but yeah, I saw it. It's not a movie you can like watch over and over again.
Definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Rick, what about you? What have you got?
Okay, I've got a rather lengthy list, as you may imagine, for this particular topic. But as I was going through, I was just kind of because you ask me what's your favorite movie in this genre, my mind goes nothing, and then 20 minutes later I start rattling them off by the dozen. So I was just kind of going through the internet, just like typed in mind blank movies, just
Yeah.
kind of going through all of these, and I'm like, yes, I like that one, and I remember that one, and that's a good one. And then I was about ready to shut down, and one came up, and I was like, how could I have not thought of this one at the beginning? Being John Malkovich.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
that's an
Love
amazing
it.
movie.
It is. One, you've got John Malkovich, who's watching him do anything is a pleasure, but watching him be everyone at one point was just amazing. The plot of the movie, if you're not familiar with it, little hard to describe. This down on his luck puppeteer goes to a job interview, and it's been a while since I've seen it, so I may be missing a few beats here, but he gets a job, and in this office there's this little tiny door that nobody knows where it goes to, and he eventually goes through the door and finds himself in John Malkovich's head. Mm-hmm. And it just goes on from there, because eventually he learns how to control John Malkovich and how to be John Malkovich. And we see the movie from inside John Malkovich. We see John Malkovich being confused as hell as what's going on. And then finally, when he's done and he exits, he gets thrown off on the side of a freeway.
Yeah.
In New Jersey,
the
I
Jersey
think.
Turnpike. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just the movie. There is a plot. It does have a progression. It is an actual story, but it is just so weird and so absurd. I love it. It's just a brilliant piece of absurdist, surreal. I don't know if surrealist is right, but it's certainly absurdist, and probably a bunch of other isms I've never even heard of or involved in the movie. And Malkovich has got to be one hell of a good sport.
Is that Spike Jonze?
I don't
Yeah.
Directed that.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Yeah, and there's a scene where apparently Malkovich is best friends with Charlie Sheen for some reason, and there's a character, Kathleen Keener is in that movie, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's a scene where she sleeps with Malkovich, but while Cameron Diaz is inside him, and then Malkovich is telling Charlie Sheen about it, and the fact that she calls out a woman's name while they're having sex or whatever, and Charlie Sheen's like, "Oh, that is hot."
And I'd like to throw out an honorable mention to a very unlikely film, but Zardoz. Have any of y'all managed to sit through Zardoz?
No.
I've seen
never
a lot
heard
of
of
it.
this.
Again,
Okay.
late night cable.
You've probably heard of it, Virginia, and don't know it. Have you ever seen any pictures of Sean Connery wearing thigh-high boots, an orange diaper-looking thing, and a
Oh my
bandolier of
God.
bullets?
Yes.
Okay.
No, you can't unsee it.
Unfortunately.
Zardoz is not in any way a good movie, but it was made in the 70s, the late 60s, early 70s, and it tries so hard to be deep. And there are these acid trip segments in the thing that put 2001 to shame. And I don't recommend watching it, but I think there's something about it that just sticks in my head when I think of just surreal, weird, just bizarre for the sake of bizarre, and it's Zardoz.
All right. What about you, Chris? What have you got?
Well, like Rick, when I looked at this one, I said, "Wow, what?" And then it really dawned on me because I just saw it recently. Although now that you mentioned Spike Jonze, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind was a really good mind F
yeah.
movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna go Vanilla Sky. I think that movie still holds up, and I love every time I watch it, I see something new. Every time I watch it, I'm reminded of why I really enjoy seeing Tom Cruise on screen. And there were just so many things about that movie that only became apparent with subsequent viewings to me. Have you guys seen it? Or
Oh yeah, I
I
have.
have not.
you should watch Virginia. I think you'd really like it. And how about you, Rick?
No, I've heard of it. I have no idea what it's about, or now I know Tom Cruise is in it. That's more than I knew 5 minutes ago.
Well, I mean, there are some conceits about it that are very sort of 80s, but it sort of takes place in like a near future because there are things that don't exist, like holograms and stuff like that. And I don't know how to describe it without spoiling it. So I would recommend that you see it. Penelope Cruz is amazing in it. My Name is Earl. What the hell? Why am I blanking on his
Jason
name?
Lee.
Jason Lee is in it.
Lee.
He's really good, and Tom Cruise he's just excellent in it. And
And Cameron
is it
Diaz.
Cameron
Cameron Diaz.
Diaz.
Yeah.
And here's one thing that you guys, I know that I get a lot of flack for this, but I am a huge Monkees fan, and the
What's wrong with
music. A lot of people, because I don't like the Beatles, but I like the Monkees. So people, rag on me all the time. But I guess Cameron Crowe, who directed the film and wrote it, there's the music is so integral to the movie. There's so much music in it as the characters going along and the music goes along. But things start going really south at the end, and Tom Cruise is like everything's falling apart, and they start playing the Porpoise song by the Monkees. And I'm thinking that's just Crow taking a swipe at the Monkees, because now everything is going south, and all of a sudden the Monkees is front and center. It's like, fuck you. But anyway, I love Vanilla Sky. So if you haven't seen it, I don't want to say too much, because it is sort of like you want to experience it. My honorable mention is, and it also maybe fits into the Buzz category, Sean, is Donnie Darko, which I knew was a big cult film that I never watched for whatever reason. But when I just one night, again, late night cable, you get in trouble, and man, that thing had me going, and I loved the way they portrayed the idea of time travel in it. Have you guys seen Donnie Darko?
Mm-mm.
Once, and I don't remember very much about it.
Okay, well, another one that I would recommend watching, and I love the fact, I love the way where it ended. All right, and it's sort of almost like a loop. Not to spoil, but it's really a compelling movie, and a lot of weird stuff happens in it. And I would recommend that one as sort of like a mind bleep film. I had one more in mind, but it'll come to me as we chat. So those are my two main ones.
Vanilla Sky is a movie that, if I remember right, when it came out, I don't know if it didn't do well. A lot of people didn't like that movie, and I think some of it is there's a lot of people that don't like Tom Cruise, and I know Tom Cruise is had got his issues and stuff, but there's very rarely a Tom Cruise movie that comes out that I don't like. He makes good movies, but that's one of those movies that when you watch it, you don't see the twist coming.
Right.
And when it gets there, then you immediately want to go back and watch the movie again and see if you can figure out the clues.
And they're all there.
I'm trying to say that without spoiling anything, but it's one of those movies that when you get to the end of it, you're going to try to decipher where things changed.
Right. And then, yeah.
Yeah, my wife just said, much like Tom Cruise.